For over 50 years, the countries of Canada and China have enjoyed a tremendous relationship together. And in fact, it was former Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau who was one of the first Western leaders to officially recognize and establish diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China. In fact, he did it 1 year prior to Richard Nixon and the United States of America. At the time, Pierre Trudeau admired the Chinese system, in which he stated that in comparison with all previous Chinese social systems, is striving to provide human dignity and equality of opportunity for the Chinese people. Now, Pierre Trudeau was very adamant that he would not let political differences sour the relationship between these two great countries. He instead wanted to focus on building on the similarities. And as a result, the countries of China and Canada have enjoyed a tremendous amount of trade and opportunity over these past 5 decades. However, everything started to change in December 2018 with the arrest of Meng Wanzhou here in Canada and the subsequent arrest of the 2 Canadian Michaels inside of China. Now, the relationship between China and Canada is extremely important. Currently, there are over 1.8 million Canadian residents who are of Chinese origin. There are 150,000 Chinese students currently studying in Canada today, and the Chinese language is the 3rd most spoken language inside of Canada behind English and French. Now, my next guest on Real Talk China is Dan Donovan. He is the publisher and managing editor of Ottawa Life magazine. Dan and I sit down for a chat discussing these various issues, but most importantly, we try to lay down a foundation on how we can improve this very important relationship between Canada and China. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 7 of Real Talk China. All right, everybody, I'd like to welcome into the studio Dan Donovan. He is the publisher and managing editor of Ottawa Life magazine. I want to welcome him to Real Talk China. Dan, how are you today?
Never better, Cyrus, and thank you for having me. And I just want to say right off the start that I've been following your channel and your work, and I think it's fantastic. I really think it's a really cogent look at China today, and I think it's something that we're missing. So I'm very pleased to be speaking with you today.
It's my pleasure. And I really appreciate the comments and the feedback. And I think it's important because you've had a lot of experience in China. Ottawa Life magazine is doing a really good job of trying to help Canadians better understand China, obviously foster a better relationship between China and Canada. That's really the topic that we're going to be discussing today. So I'm excited to, sit down with you and talk about some of these issues and, really kind of lay a foundation for what hopefully will be a better relationship between these two great countries.
Well, it's interesting, and I think you hit the nail on the head, because one of the interesting things I find, we've been writing about China for 7 or 8 years now. We started this back in 2012, 2013, just as a magazine project to do a Canada-China friendship series. And this is, relations were very good back then. There's a large Chinese diaspora in Canada. Here, even in the Ottawa region, we thought this is a good thing to do. China's an important trading partner. We know what Canadians are, the perspective and often at times a wrong perspective about China. But we always tried to do it right from the beginning. Well, how do the Chinese see things?
Correct.
Now that worked fine until 2018. And then after 2018, when Meng Wanzhou was arrested in Vancouver, wrongly arrested in my view, but that's another issue. It's interesting how then the narrative of the Canadian government changed. The narrative towards, for example, our magazine changed on this. We went from putting out information and sharing information about China to being really surprisingly, viscerally attacked by other media and people in government in this country. And I found it quite shocking.
Right.
And I thought, well, that's not right. And to this day it happens. What I realized is the bias in some of the media reporting here, the inability to get outside of the box and to look at things from the Chinese perspective. There's sort of defensive posture both in the media reporting and in the government approach to China. and it's gone from what I would say is a misdirected narrative to a very adversarial one, and it's I'm quite concerned about it. Whenever we publish anything on China, we're immediately accused of being, propagandists. It's just quite incredible. It's quite incredible.
I can certainly speak from experience, someone that has a YouTube channel dedicated to the topic of China. Unfortunately, in the past 2 years, the world's attitude towards China has changed a lot. But I want to hit on something that you said that I think is very important, is really examining the relationship also from the Chinese perspective. And I think that's where I'm a firm believer that, so much of the conflict between China and Western countries really does boil down to cultural differences. I believe that these will always exist. I think it's really important to recognize that. And I think it's really important to, connect with people that have had experience in China and that can bring a valuable perspective, because you can't always examine things just from one angle. And I think, unfortunately, in the West, we don't give China that respect. We don't look at them and say, you are an emerging, country, one of the fastest developing countries in the world. China deserves a seat at the table just as much as the United States does. Canada and we call the Five Eyes nations, the UK, Australia. I have a feeling sometimes that we want to still look at China as, you're not at our level yet. You're still below us. And there's a little bit of arrogance there. And I think if we just realize that China has its own system, it has its own way, we need to respect that. I think that would go a long way in starting to form a better relationship between these countries. Now, I want to be clear about that. I'm not saying that we need to adopt China's way or China's way is going to be the right thing for us. I think very clear about that is that China has something, they have a unique system that has worked well in China. Who are we to go in and tell them, you need to change your system, you need to do it our way? Very much the same. I mean, I would not be happy if China came into America, my home country, and said, you guys need to change your government, you need to change the way you do things. So we need to really accept the fact that we're going to have these differences and make sure that we build on the similarities. And that is really, how, my former president, Richard Nixon, when he went to China to start this diplomatic relations, obviously Pierre Trudeau, he actually opened up.
Got there first, that's right.
Yeah,
Mr. Trudeau got there first.
Which is I think 1 or 2 years earlier. So Canada, first established, quite amazing. But that's the key message, we're going to have differences, but let's build on our similarities. And the partnership between Canada and China is, can be prosperous. It can be really good, and it does help both people.
I actually wrote an article about this about two or 3 weeks ago, and in the article, the title of the article was that Canada's approach to China is based on a superiority complex and bad reporting.
Yeah,
and this is something that I think it's important for Canadians, I think, to be more self-reflective when it comes to China.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, and you've mentioned this in your other podcasts, China has been around for 4,000 years, dynasties.
Yeah.
The United States, Canada, we've been around a couple of hundred years. It's incumbent upon us to try to approach other countries respectfully. We have 38 million people in this country. The Chinese have 1.4 billion people.
Correct.
I recall the previous ambassador to Canada was a fellow named Liu Shea, Ambassador Liu. And I remember having tea with him when he first came to Ottawa about 4 or 5 years ago. And he said at the time, China's China. China doesn't want to be the West. Yeah. This is pre the Meng Wanzhou thing. Right. And he said, we are the Communist Party of China is a historical decision made by the people of China. That's our government. That's our form of government. Right. We are a Marxist socialist government with Chinese characters. Part of the problem here is we see, with good reason, but it's a different system. We see Marxism as a bad thing. We see communism as Soviet communism, North Korean communism, Cuban communism. These are regimes that are responsible for the deaths and disasters of the last century and wars and so forth. So, I think that people who don't take the time to become informed just assume that's China. And China, that is not Chinese communism today. With Marxist, they take from the Marxist ideology and they've customized it to fit their people and society and social strata. They've got one of the most dynamic economies in the world. It's actually, as you know, a capitalist economy really within this in this construct of this Marxist socialist thing. So it's not anything like Soviet communism at all. And I think that's where there's a lot of bias and ignorance here. And I think also the idea, so when I first spoke to Luce, the point is this is what he was trying to stress, and we're trying to work for our people and do these things. And it's, we have a country and we have these people and a third of the planet,
Yeah.
Fast forward to Meng Wanzhou was arrested. A month after she was arrested back in 2018, so in January 2019, and this for me was a very telling thing about our relationship with Canada.
Mm-hmm.
A month after she was arrested, Ambassador Liu published an op-ed in the Globe and Mail about the Meng Wanzhou arrest, saying what a betrayal it had been to the Canada-China relationship, that she should be released immediately. And by the way, it's racist. This is what he basically said. He said, he used a term, it's racism. He said, there's a superiority complex here.
Right.
And so my idea when you get something like that is that you should reflect on that and say, well, that's the ambassador saying that. As you know, in China, they don't just say things. An ambassador is not just going to put that out there. That a lot of thought went into that, and they knew exactly what they were doing. And I thought, well, why aren't we reflecting on what he's saying? He is saying that we're acting like racists, and why would he say that? And in essence, what he was saying, because we were saying they don't have the rule of law in China. Right. That's what he was saying. Your government, your prime minister is suggesting China doesn't have a rule of law. And you're suggesting that the Western way and the Western rule of law and the Western democracy is superior to our system. Thereby, we are inferior to you. That's the suggestion. So that's where they see it as being unbalanced and it's a harsh word, but racist.
Right.
And I thought, well, we should reflect on that. Your point, they have a completely different system. It's not our system. We may think our system is the best system. But to approach other countries with that arrogance, I think, is a very dangerous path. And this is why, and frankly, since 2018, we have not backed down from that narrative. In fact, we haven't backed down, we've doubled down.
Right.
And the political relationship has gotten much worse.
It is quite fascinating to have these two world superpowers, the United States and China, battling it out in, the British Columbia Supreme Court House. It's unfortunate because I do feel that Canada was largely dragged into this conflict. Obviously, they did have a responsibility to honor, their relationship with the United States. If there is an extradition request, Canada cannot just simply refuse it. I mean, they need to acknowledge that. But I think when you start looking at, the violations against her rights, during the entire arrest process, there's not a lot of conclusive evidence to this. And I think it's just really put things, it's been a very difficult thing for all three countries. We know that these extradition cases typically do last a very long time, years, so we're several years into this already. I'm excited for the fact that the judge, did allow some new evidence to be brought into the trial, or to the hearing, I should say. And I'm excited because I think when this resumes later on this year, hopefully we're going to be able to get a decision. But I really want, all countries involved. And I think Canada needs to do a little bit more as well, to just make sure that, let's resolve this issue. We need to figure out how we're going to move on from this, because that's ultimately, one of the goals with my channel is we have to find a way to work together with China. How are we going to do that? How are we going to pivot away from the current rhetoric that is being, really led by my government, the United States government, is that, China is the greatest threat to the world. I think that if we partner with China, it could be the greatest benefit to the world. China is developing so much future technology. I've made episodes, for example, on China's digital currency, amazing technology that's really going to shape the future of our world. The electronic vehicle market, you look at digital payments. I mean, all of these technologies are emerging, and it's going to make our worlds faster, smarter, more efficient. I think the best way forward, for a country like Australia, look at how much they profited and had great business for so many Australian lives partnering with China. And their government has made a complete decision to back away from its largest trading partner. And I think, many Australian citizens are going to suffer as a result of that. I don't see China being this threat of going to America, Canada, Australia, trying to spread communism that way. I've said this before. I don't think China's government would really work anywhere else in the world except China. So, it's not this copy and paste, China's system's great. Let's bring that to other countries around the world. I don't think China has the ambition for that. I think that China just wants to make sure that they're doing it their way. And if you look at the economic success and most importantly, the success for the people, that's something that a lot of people, don't realize is go to China, talk to the actual people on the ground, see how their lives have improved. There's a tremendous amount of optimism. There's a tremendous amount of happiness that exists in China, but that is not often portrayed in Western media.
Well, this is the complete disconnect in the West with regards to our relations with China. As you know, China has moved over 700 million people out of poverty into the middle income level in the last 32 years. It's the most significant change in any civilization in the history of the world. 750 million people in 3 decades have been moved from poverty to middle income level living. And they've pretty well in the last year or two eradicated poverty in their country. This is something that they worked on and planned under Deng Xiaoping, and then of course President Xi, and the government in between.
Correct.
The problem is this: when it comes,
I just want to put one clear. It is absolute poverty that they've alleviated. There's still certain poverty that exists in China. I just want to be clear on that. So
because there's still
it's still in the process, right? It's still in the process. They're working through these campaigns and stuff, but it's a priority for sure for the government. And I think it's some people, sorry to interrupt, but some people have said, oh, this poverty alleviation campaigns, it's just actually tools from to spread propaganda. And I said, no, I mean, to be honest, it's really, how do we make our society better? I think one of the key things that you see in China is education. You see people saying, look, you're living in this rural villages, you don't have access to education. How are the young people in these villages, how are you going to have a better life unless, we move you into a better area, provide you a pathway for a better education, because education is going to be, your ticket to a better life. And that's the long-term success, right? It's not like, here's a bunch of money, now you're not poor.
Now you're not.
How do we create the systems that are going to actually create tangible results over the long term?
Well, agreed. And of course, in lifting people out of extreme poverty into a better standard of living, there's a process and an infrastructure and an economy and planning around that and how to do that benefit people.
Yeah.
The challenge that I see is when that is expressed here, or those positions or facts are put forward, it's seen in some quarters here as a nefarious thing, as a threatening thing. This is again the problem with our current relationship Canada's with China. If we go back to the Meng Wanzhou thing, Chinese view the detention of Meng as a kidnapping. They've said that we were forced by the American government to detain her. The extradition treaty, there's an argument there. Many legal scholars in this country have said that, at the end of the day, even after the court case, I mean, I know you covered this, so I won't spend long on it, but even after the court case, even if a judge were to decide to send her to the United States, extradite her to the United States, this decision still gets kicked back to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General here, and he gets the final decision. The issue for Canada is it has to be, where are we going with China? How do we get things back on track? How do we get things back to a level of discussion and cooperation and negotiation so that our countries can mutually benefit each other and we can benefit trade and prosperity? The problem in Canada right now is that our government is not on that page. They have not expressed any desire to be on that page, and I find that very troubling.
Right.
Worse, I'm concerned about the official opposition in this country. We have a government that has no policy right now with regards to China, other than to try to turn other countries against China in terms of the diplomacy, international diplomacy. Obviously, everyone's concerned about the two Michaels. Everybody wants them released. Every time we interview the ambassador, the first thing we ask him is about the two Michaels. Yesterday when we interviewed the current ambassador, Ambassador Kong, and we'll be publishing this shortly, we said to him, since they've been prosecuted, has China considered releasing them on humanitarian grounds? Was that something you would consider?
Mm-hmm.
And his, as the Chinese do, his answer was, they have systems that allow for certain things in their rule of law, and these are under consideration. But essentially, That's not happening right now. Problem is, what are we doing? What can we do as a country to try to move things forward? Our opposition, the Conservative leader Erin O'Toole, has referred to China as an enemy, as an adversary. He wants Huawei banned, for example. Huawei mobile technologies banned from Canada, the G5 network banned.
Yeah.
And I don't know, when you have four former prime ministers in this country who have all said, including the deceased great Prime Minister John Turner, Mr. Mulroney, Mr. Chrétien, they've all said that Meng should be released.
Right.
We had 100 diplomats write a letter last year, former diplomats, senior diplomats, saying this is a mistake, she should be released. The challenge is
some progress there.
What do we do? What does Canada do? Why is the narrative A? And why is it that in our country we can't seem to get more mainstream media reporting in this country about the Chinese perspective on these things? Whether we agree with it or not, that's not the issue. We need to have more of the perspective of the things that you're doing, where we're explaining, no, this is how the Chinese see it. And it's not going to be in simpatical a lot of times with us. But that doesn't make the Chinese an adversary, and it certainly doesn't make them evil. It doesn't make them a bad people. They talk about wanting cooperation, mutual cooperation, respectful cooperation. These are all good things, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think, you still see a tremendous amount of support from the Chinese, people towards Western countries. We have a tremendous, Chinese population here in Canada. They're a very big part of our community here inside this country. There's been a lot of immigration from China, a lot of international students that come and contribute to Canadian, society and universities. So I think there is a great opportunity to continue building this. I speak a lot about my home country, America, because, we've seen some politicians in there saying, look, we need to ban all Chinese international students. And unfortunately, like you said, we see this, this continuation, let's ban Huawei, let's ban students, let's ban, Alibaba, let's basically ban WeChat Pay, everything that we can ban from China. And again, I think we go back to that main issue here is, let's talk about it from the Chinese perspective and just realize that, again, this is a key point. You might not agree with it, but you should be able to sit down and be able to listen to the other side and just hear what they have to say. The big meeting, United States and China in Alaska, there was a very big controversy there because there was not a lot of respect given there. It was simply America coming to the table and dictating, you need to do it our way. This is how it's going to go. And I think,
and it's interesting. You would agree,
yeah,
in a meeting like that, a high level meeting like that, the Chinese, whose tradition and way of doing things is very sort of low key, formal, proper.
Right.
I think the broadside that they were given by the Biden administration at that meeting was quite unexpected.
Correct.
The tone was certainly very aggressive. So I was surprised that the Chinese rebuttal to that was very robust. They came back and sort of doubled down and with sort of, don't talk to us like that. And I think this is a new stream we're going to see that's starting to emerge from China, who's I call, China's emerging right now on the global stage, whether it's with the Belt and Road Initiative and some of these other in the South China Sea with their Navy. They're getting to a point where they have a Blue Sea Navy.
Right.
And they're starting to say, we're not just going to just sort of have you talk to us this way. When I spoke to the ambassador yesterday, he referenced Taiwan, and he said, Taiwan is a part of China. Well, I said, well, actually, they don't see it that way. They and then he referenced, what the UN says about Taiwan and Western and American navies in the area, and they're worried about an incident.
Right.
We have some tough issues, and I don't think. And one of the things he mentioned is we need to have dialogue. We need to have discussion because we don't want an incident.
Correct. Absolutely.
So how do we get to that?
I think it's great to see, a publication like yourself, Ottawa Life magazine, publication here in Canada that obviously is appealing to the local market, but hopefully, bringing a little bit more balance to this equation, and I want people to just understand that, like we've mentioned already in this show today, the fact that we need to, examine things from both sides of the situation. I think, Canada, we have a lot of great things that are happening here. We have a fantastic style of government that suits, the country of Canada very well, has been very successful. And I think we need to, again, look on how we can complement each other and, how can we work together with China. Again, Pierre Trudeau, opened up, relations with China before the United States did, so Canada and China have had a great history of working together. And I think, there are a lot of issues that need to be solved. But constructive dialogue, being willing to sit down and looking at China as an equal and giving them that respect, and then looking to work on, some of these complex issues that need to be discussed. I mean, you mentioned the two Michaels. That is a situation that all of us in Canada are very concerned about, and that we certainly, would like to see resolved. But what are we doing from the Canadian side, to help Meng Wanzhou, and get her released as well? This is an important thing for China. It's really no different that both countries are concerned for their citizens. What are we doing, here to help balance that out and to help move this discussion moving forward, and most importantly, move this relationship moving forward? Because, there's really just two options. Do we go down this continued pathway that will eventually lead to a conflict, which of course will have a ripple down effect throughout the world, or do we eventually pivot to peace and learn to reconcile the differences and have better open discussions? I think that's kind of the key takeaway from this video. Obviously that is a big goal with this channel, to try to facilitate more talking, more dialogue, and more understanding of China.
Well, I think that's a great way to round it out, Cyrus. I would say I'll sort of end by saying this. I think one of the things I've learned, and I would encourage your people watching this discussion today, and the people that follow you as well, obviously, it's important to recognize that for countries to have relations and social relations and economic relations, we have to have political cooperation. One of the great things that I've learned in my journey on the Canada-China file, if you will, is we have a strong relationship with China going back to the 1880s. Strong business relation, business to business, people to people relationship. In Canada, we have the Asia Pacific Foundation, the Canada-China Business Council, the Canadian Eco Institute, a whole lot of organizations that really have a real deep knowledge of the relationship. And in these times especially, those organizations and their relationships are incredibly important for our country to make sure that there's backroom dialogue going on, and that the undercurrent is strong. And of course, we have so many foreign students here from China. Correct. And it's important that we try to. I'm hopeful. I remain hopeful that, as you said, Pierre Trudeau was one of the first Western leaders to recognize China over 50 years ago, prior to Nixon. I'm hopeful that his son, our current prime minister, will come around, get this sort of wagon back on the road, and we can get Meng Wanzhou home and get the two Michaels back here, and we can just get back to business. And I would encourage everyone to just try to look at this issue from both sides, but especially I think it's more important right now to try to understand it from the Chinese perspective. Why are they so angry with our government right now? And what can we do ourselves to turn the heat down on that a bit?
Well, Dan, I want to thank you so much for coming on this episode of Real Talk China. We'll have to do this again. I think we have a lot of issues that we can discuss here in Canada and China and this relationship. And I want to thank you for sharing your perspective. And again, thank you for your work that you're doing, trying to bring, an interesting angle, something that's not often covered in Western media. I think Ottawa Life magazine is doing a great job in bringing in some of that Chinese perspective, again, so that we can foster a better relationship and that we can really learn, how we can work with China. So thank you for sharing your story.
Really great to be with you, Cyrus, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversation.
All right. Thank you so much. Everyone, I want to thank you for making it to this point in the video and watching my latest episode of Real Talk China. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. I'm really looking forward to bringing in some more guests talking about the importance of establishing a better relationship with the country of China today. Let me know what you thought of this episode, and also let me know what other issues you'd like to discuss between the countries of Canada and China and this very important relationship. Everyone, thanks again for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video.